Welcome back to my channel, DebtFree CF. If you watched the previous video, you saw me set up in Excel spreadsheets a December budget that was just very basic. Set it up for if you have two people with a single income that you're calculating on a monthly basis. Set up the first section to have the income, so all of your money coming in a month. If you have side jobs or other methods of payment that come in on somewhat of a regular basis, or you get some gifts, that would all go in the income section. So you can add rows as necessary, or you could just add it in your row if you're calculating per person. If you have two jobs, you could list per job. Just depends what you need to track or what you prefer to track. Then in the second section, set up for expenses. There's two columns, one for the estimated and then one for the actual. Sometimes you may plan that you're only going to be driving your normal day-to-day, and so that might be $30 a month of gas, and then you end up deciding halfway through the month to go visit a friend. You have to drive an extra 100 miles, so you end up needing a little bit more in gas. That's the only major difference between estimated and actual. Medical expenses could arise that you're uncertain of, or you may be doing some calculations in the left column for reaching your goals, and then in the right column you can try to match that as best as possible in order to reach those goals or get as close as you can. And then in the third section, you transpose, or you bring the total from the income section and the total from the expenses section and put them one above the other, and then have auto calculations. And I'll go through the auto calculations again as we're formatting, but this video is mostly to focus on how to actually format the setup. So I've got already at the top a month and year. You don't have to label them if you don't want. I usually label the tabs at the bottom of the workbook with the month. I do also include the month inside it, just so that when I'm looking at it, I know. I mostly use Google Sheets, which is pretty identical, but for this purpose I'm going through the setup in Excel. So all of your formatting is basically, if you're trying to do something with the font, it's going to be on your Home tab. If you're trying to do something that's specific to the actual cells, you're going to be doing that more under the formatting. If you do conditional formatting for the rules, which I'll walk you through. So in this particular cell, the December one, I'm just going to randomly pick a color. So let's say kind of maybe this reddish brown. And then to make it easier to read, I'll change the text to a lighter color. I guess white would do. So I'm using some of the controls up here in the font box, the fill icon for the actual background of the cell. I'm going to make all of this a little bit bigger to read. So since I've got text in cell A1, and I've also got text all the way down here in cell H23, I'm going to make sure that I select all of those, so I held down Shift and clicked from one to the other. And then I'm just going to say size 12 should be sufficient. It's actually a little bit small, so let's make it maybe size 14. That looks pretty good. You'll notice that some of the values in the C column turned into number signs. That just means it doesn't fit. So I'm going to hover in between the two columns and get the vertical line with two arrows pointing opposite directions, and then when I double click, it's going to expand or shrink to the size of the largest line of text in any of the cells in the column. So if I do the same thing in between C and D, that will apply to the C column, and so now I have enough room for the number that before was just a bunch of pound signs. And then I usually do some kind of outlining for the different sections. So I'm going to change this to actually say monthly income, since we're doing a monthly budget. And then that makes it a little bit wider. So again, I'm going to have to hover between the two and increase the width. And so this section heading, I'm just going to make it maybe like a light gray. And then I actually want to do that for all the section headings to make them the same. I'm actually going to put a section in here. So I'm going to make that gray as well. So since it's already selected gray on the fill, I can actually just click on the fill bucket and it'll fill them in with that color. Okay. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to add a row. I'm right clicking on the number and I'm going to add a row beneath, wanted to add a row beneath 17. And the reason I'm going to do that is I'm actually going to make this my results or my tally for the month. And this is going to be automatically calculated. Call it automatic. Since that doesn't fit, but this is a section heading, I'm going to merge all of the cells together. So I use the Shift key to click on multiple cells, and then up here in the alignment section I can click on merge and center. I don't actually want it centered, so I can just then change it back to left aligned. And these ones I will keep sometimes. Personally, I don't really need the extra label of estimated and actual in the columns in the second section, but it's completely up to you. So we've got monthly income, we've got monthly expenses, and we've got our results. Okay. Now in the total income, total expenses, and variance section, I've got the calculation, like the simple formula, already set up. So since I've got this box highlighted, I can see in my formula bar that I've got the C20 cell, which is the total income in the actual column, subtracting the total expenses in the actual column, and then that'll give me whatever the difference is between the two. The goal is that this is going to be 0. So goal is to equal 0. And the reason the goal is to make the variance equal 0 is because you've got a savings category and a retirement category. So these two categories together can become the collection of quote-unquote the leftover. So anytime you've already added up what you need to allot for food and utilities and your rent and any other expenses or payments that you might have, that's going to give you something left over, hopefully. If you're paying off debt, you might not have anything left over, and so you might not be putting anything into retirement or anything into savings. And this retirement is actually what you would be calculating after anything that's pulled out of your check by your company. So if you have 2% from your paycheck that automatically goes into a 401k, you don't put that value in here because you don't actually see it in your check. So the amount in your actual for income would already have deducted the amount that went to retirement. So the retirement category in this particular layout is only for any amount from your paycheck that you bring home that you then put into something like a Roth IRA or a traditional IRA, something like that, or even some other kind of investment. And then savings would be anything that isn't going into retirement and is carrying over from one month to the other, but not just for the purpose of carrying it over. There should be some kind of goal or earmark. So it's going into an emergency fund, or you're saving up to replace a car, or you're just creating a sinking fund to buffer for unknown medical expenses, or for me, I do one for my pets because I know that they're going to have vaccinations once a year, which are a couple $100. So I just want to make sure that over the course of the year I've saved for that rather than having to pay it all in one month, although most of the time I probably could if I needed to. So back to the variance. The goal is that the variance will be equal to 0. So one thing we can do is we can put in conditional formatting. We can put in a rule that says if the value of the cell is something, then do this, like make it a certain color. If the value is something else, then make it a different color yet again, and so on and so on. So I'm going to show you how to do that with the conditional formatting button up at the top. So I want this particular box, the variance, to behave in a certain way based on if the number is 0, if the number is negative, or if the number is positive. So when I use the conditional formatting button, I want to click on New Rule. And there's a bunch of different options in here. You can format based on the value of the cell. You could use a formula. So anytime that this particular cell is greater than whatever, and you divide it by 2, and it's still greater than whatever, or whatever. I mean, you could make it up, but that's not what we're going to be doing in this particular example. So we're going to be doing formatting based on the value of the cell. You can have two values, so you could have if it's negative or if it's positive and then nothing for 0. Or you could have it with 3 values where it's negative or positive or actually 0. So I'm going to set it with 3 colors just so that we can see what it looks like. You can do whatever you want. So I don't want a lowest value because that's going to compare to the column or the row or whatever it decides to use, however you set it. I want an actual number. Now if I put 0 in all of these, then I'm going to end up with it's going to not know what to do, and it's just going to start with the very first color assignment. So actually what I want is the minimum is going to be a negative number, right? So negative 0.01, so negative 1 cent, meaning if it's even 1 cent in the negative, it's going to be red. If it's 0, it's going to be, let's make it purple. And if it is at least a positive number, so 0.01 cent, right, positive 1 cent at least, it'll be green. Okay, so if I'm negative, it's going to show me red. If I'm right at 0, I'll get purple because I'm, like right on royalty. And then for green, I still got some money that I need to apply somewhere. And again, it could go into savings, retirement. So I click OK, and I can see that it's already applying, right? Because I had both those cells highlighted. One of the cells has a value of 0, and one of the cells has a negative value. Now if I change so that that cell's value would change to 0, so does the cell formatting. If I change it so that the variant cell is going to end up being a positive number, I see that that changes it as well. So I've applied conditional formatting to let me know where I am in terms of my budgeting. You could do that in some of the other cells if you wanted, like if the actual column matches your estimated column, then you're good. I just make mine pretty simple so that as I'm going through I can see, have I completed my budgeting goal of reaching 0 and having every dollar accounted for somewhere. So that's kind of the basics of getting this applied. You can have your text left aligned, right aligned, centered, whatever it is that you prefer. I tend to prefer left or right alignment based off of some kind of notes that I might be making. So usually I have my expenses left aligned. I have my results right aligned so that they're as close to the numeric value as possible. I usually have my income, because I know it's steady, left aligned, and then in this particular example I have a roommate that contributes like how much to rent and splitting utilities and so forth, and so I put that on the right because that varies a little bit, so it reminds me that I want to make some adjustments. I usually put some notes here, but the notes are usually a little bit smaller. You could shrink how much of the title left to right is centered and how many merged cells you're using over the course of your different columns. This is just a basic setup of just the month's budget. This doesn't include anything where I might be tracking over the course of multiple months, such as retirement or the value in some of my accounts combined to know what my total net worth is. If you had some kind of debt snowball, you might track that off onto the right side. So this is just kind of a very basic getting started. Single person, 2 people, single person with 2 jobs type of setup, whether or not you have pets. If you don't have pets and you're paying off debt, I've got in this box here, let me move it over a little bit so you can see, I've got the order of what priority should be. So payments would come right after rent. So medical would be replaced probably with payments. You would still have like some insurance things that you might have to pay. You might break down your payments to individual loan titles and so forth, but that would go kind of in this section here just below rent. And you would just make minimum payments on each of your loans or debts until you get one paid off. That's the smallest, and then that minimum payment that you were making to that one plus any extra now goes to your second debt, and then anything extra, if you do some side jobs, throw that at the debt, get the debt gone as fast as possible. And then that way you can work towards building wealth. So this is kind of just a quick formatting layout intro. This is using Excel spreadsheets versus Google Sheets, which is similar, but you can access it anywhere, which is why I tend to use it. I can pull it up on my phone if I want to add a couple of expense items while I'm traveling. And then also if I get an email of a bill, then I'll put the bill in as well, right as I'm thinking about it, rather than doing it all like on a weekend or something as kind of a wrap up. But you can do it however you want. I tend to revisit this budgeting probably anywhere from 2 to 5 times in a month. Depends how busy I am, depends how many unexpected expenses I have that come up. So I hope you enjoyed the formatting. If you have any questions, please let me know. And if you want to see something else, like I'm going to do one coming up on every dollar, just kind of how it works, layout, filling in the numbers. I might do some on another format if somebody asks. One thing I'm going to show in January is a comparison of a monthly layout. So this is breaking it down by what's owed per month and just calculating over the multiple weeks. But in January, I'm going to make a video that is if I were to do it by pay period. So I do actually get paid every 2 weeks. So if I broke down my payments that received in 2 weeks, and then how would I apply that particular bit of income to the bills that I can with that particular check. And then when the second or third check, on some months a third check comes in, on the second and third checks, when would I apply those, and how would I prioritize using this priority list in terms of if I couldn't pay everything up front at the beginning. So if you want to see something about that, come back in January, and that'll be posted probably sometime after the 9th and sometime before the 17th. All right, this is DebtFree CF.